My greetings to all the viewers of Wooler Telecast from London. Your host Javed Kakru is here with a very interesting and very important program on multiculturalism in Kashmir. Multiculturalism in Kashmir is the essence of democracy and in the modern world is considered the most pleasant means of promoting and recognizing the development, worth, and potential of different sections of people living in a country. In developed countries, a great effort is on since long to promote multiculturalism, and billions of dollars are earmarked for the purpose by the governments. Even laws are enacted to promote and protect multiculturalism in these countries and adhered to a great extent. India is a multi-religious, multicultural, and multilingual country. Its plurality necessitates and implies secularism and unity in diversity. Kashmir is and has been a shining example of the pluralism not only in the subcontinent but is well known beyond the frontier of the subcontinent for its centuries built tolerance, love, and harmony. It's, however, painful to see that this pleasant culture of harmony is injured, which poses a challenge to all the inhabitants of the state and the country to heal it back. Culture is a very vast subject, and justice to it cannot be done in one program. World Telecast will organize different programs on its different dimensions. However, in today's program, a synoptic view of multiculturalism in Kashmir will be taken care of. In today's program, my guests and my panelists, let me introduce them. First of all, I have Mr. Salim Beg, who has joined us direct from Srinagar. Mr. Beg is a well-known historian, a person who has been working on Kashmir heritage since long. He is not only well-known in the subcontinent, but the universities, in particular in United States and in United Kingdom, like Oxford and Cambridge. Mr. Beg has been working with them and has been very instrumental for projecting and promoting Kashmir heritage. Mr. Beg has served on many of departments in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and lastly, he was Director General of Tourism. I welcome you, Mr. Beg.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. My second guest for today is Mr. M.K. Rana, Maharaj Krishan Rana, a well-known personality. I need not to introduce to him. I believe that as long as the people have seen Mr. Rana on the screen, they would have recognized who the person is. But let me tell you that Mr. Rana is connected with film and theatre of Kashmir, and we will be looking to hear from him today about this topic, which is multiculturalism and let's enlighten ourselves from his expertise. I welcome you, Mr. Ren. My another guest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, sir. My another guest, another son of the soil, Mr. Ashok Ban, a senior advocate from Supreme Court in Delhi. Mr. Ban is an activist, a politician, and has a great knowledge about Kashmir. Mr. Ban, I welcome you on the program.
Thank you.
My another guest, I think I have lost a couple of guests, but let's start, and as soon as the guests will be introducing them and we will be talking to them. But before we will start, we had an apology from Professor Sadiq Wahid that he couldn't join us because he's not well. Let's pray for his good health and let's see that he gets well soon. Now, as far as today's program is concerned, let me straightway go to Professor Mr. Salim Beg. Mr. Beg, the format of the program will be very informal. We have some questions for the panelists, and if there are some questions which arise from the panelists, we will be having the time at the end for 10-15 minutes to take those questions. My first question, Mr. Beg, will be going to you as, could you explain us that what multiculturalism means, what's the concept of the multiculturalism, and Kashmir being a blend of Indian, Persian, and Central Asian influences. Could you please throw some light on it with some historical background? Mr. Beg, floor is yours.
Thank you, Javed Saab. Well, multiculturalism, I don't know if in the same term and same understanding, we would certainly like to relate Kashmir as such in the process and practice of multiculturalism, which we also call syncretism, inclusiveness, diversity, whatever. So for Kashmir, it has been a historic process, and it's not just a statement. It has been an expression of inclusiveness, expression of continuity of faiths, beliefs in one form or the other. And this statement has been made through various mediums. One of the very essential mediums, of course, obviously has been the literature. Also our customs and what you call culture, but also some very essential, important and significant statements made through the medium of architecture.
Right.
I know there are others who will speak on different subjects and they are more competent than me to talk about it. I would like to take you through a presentation to show you how various cultural influences, as you stated, Persian and other Central Asian, whatever, have permeated the borders of Kashmir and have helped evolve a society which is very inclusive, which is very diverse also. And one essential feature of this diversity has been that it's not that we have been tolerating these influences. There's been an element of acceptance of these influences. And this acceptance is reflected through integration of these influences. I'm sure because of the presence of Shad Ramzan Sahab, I think we will go through the literary aspect of multiculturalism. But our multiculturalism in the present form can be expressed through the medium of literature in a very broad sweep. So I'll restrict myself only as of now to the medium of architecture. I'll run a presentation for about 8, 9 or 10 minutes to show you how these influences, as you mentioned, as the question has been, have come and influenced our medium, influence our society as such, or helped in evolving a multicultural society as a show of respect for different faiths. So let's share the screen and go to the presentation direct.
Right, Mr. Beg. So let's share the screen. I have shared the screen,
I have
and
also shared the
let's
screen.
see if there is any problems. We will see how to solve those problems.
All these
Yes,
thinkers.
I have shared my screen, Mr. Beg, and now you do the rest what is needed. Mhm. No, we can't hear you, Mr. Beg. We can't hear you.
Can't hear anything here.
We can't hear you. Yes. Can you hear us? Mr. Beg, we can't hear you. Your mic is,
Big sir, we can't hear you.
Beg Saab, your mic is muted. You need to unmute your mic. Hello, Beg Saab, we can't hear you. Sorry, we can hear only, I think it's a news at the background. We can't hear you, Beg Saab. No, Beg Saab, we
Nara,
can't.
slides also are not visible.
No, slides are not visible.
Nothing is visible.
Beg Saab is not visible. I think we have lost Beg Saab, and hopefully Beg Saab will come again. And let's. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I think we have lost Big Sub, and it's 8 o'clock now. It's time for
Can we
their
phone him or something?
load shedding. I have, yeah. If Mr. Rena, if you could just give him a ring.
I'm giving a ring.
And he's in Srinagar, he must have some power issues.
Exactly. Right. Hopefully, because as we are on air and people are watching us, let Mr. Beg come, and let me take Mr. Ashok Ban. Ban Sahab, I have a,
Yes.
I have a question for you. That secularism and pluralism is under threat in India. What impact it has on Kashmir? Can you throw some light on it? And as I have two parts for your question, so let me take some answer from the first part.
Javed sir, thanks for having me. The multiculturalism in Kashmir
Mhm.
has been diverse. It has been blend and highly influenced by, as you said, Indian, Persian, and Central Asian cultures.
It's
And
not
basically,
picking up.
Kashmir
It's not picking up.
Basically, Kashmir culture was heavily influenced by Hinduism, Buddhism in the past.
Right.
And after the Muslim influx, it came under the influence of Islam. So that is the reality in
He's
Kashmir.
not answering the phone.
All right. Okay.
He's not answering the phone.
We will try to contact him. Okay.
So
Bansal.
I have given you a brief backdrop of what multiculturalism in Kashmir has been and is currently now. But if we take a broader definition of this multiculturalism,
Mhm.
basically it helps to balance the socio-political ecosystem of a state.
Mhm.
And in It encourages inclusion and blunts the alienation within various communities.
Right.
Like a lawyer, let me put this point across to you. After the globalization now, at the broad level, we are facing world as a global village. And it has created cross-cultural, religious, and ethnic ties between people of various countries.
Mhm.
This manifests, what does it manifest ultimately? It manifests the cultural diversity. And most of the countries have now adopted it as a process of assimilation and integration,
Mhm.
yet maintaining their cultural diversity within their borders.
Right.
So it has, multiculturalism has gained colossal importance in the modern system, in the modern politico socio cultural ecosystem.
Mhm.
Except that Kashmir has faced its reversal. At least I be not wrong in saying that for last 3.5 decades, the multiculturalism in Kashmir got a setback. And setback was because of various influences coming forth. I would not blame Kashmiri society as such, but I would certainly, I was encouraged to say many times that Kashmir society, despite having been aggressively, forced and an influence of non-liberal Islam in Kashmir, socio-cultural way of life in Kashmir. But down the time, 3 decades, we have been observing that Kashmiri society has stuck to its multicultural ecosystem. It has not accepted the outside influence of changing domain of its multicultural system in Kashmir. The dominant non-liberal Islam which came and which forced its entry into Kashmir has have only few takers, but the society collectively has not changed, has not accepted. It may have changed the political narrative, but it has not changed the template of the strength of the multicultural ecosystem in Kashmir. That still is intact, despite the attempt that those zealots who came to convert this multicultural ecosystem into unilateral system, despite those zealots come and perpetrated even militancy, arsons, and also, devastating certain cultural centers, centers of excellence, centers of heritage. They not only devastated, they gutted them off so that no traces remain. I always salute my resilient Kashmir society. It has maintained that ecosystem and it is intact even today. My only worry in the present context is that secularism is a part of multiculturalism because now secularism was to basically separate the religion from politics, from state. But over the years, all over the world, a neo-nationalism concept of politics and culture came up. You saw the advent of President Trump in US, advent of so many so-called nationalists who call themselves on the horizon of all the states, of all the nations. But gradually people are realizing that in the global system of politics and in globalization and globe being a very narrow village now, and it has its vested interest interlinked with all the states. So therefore people have realized that no, this so-called nationalism uh, is not conducive for the growth of the health of multicultural ecosystem, and it takes that cost. That cost people are not willing to pay. You raised a very pertinent question. I will again relate it to Kashmir and then come to India. Kashmir saw the advent of an political narrative for other cultural entities and religious entities. And all their identities as their heritage were attacked. They were set at fire. I would not blame that it was an attack on only the multicultural ethos of Kashmir, but it came as an attack on the very existence of the Kashmir society, its activities devastated the spiritual ethos, cultural and both political ethos also. And I saw when I visit Kashmir, go to remote villages, the multiculturalism and multi-religious entities of a community which have been from Kashmir as a religious minority.
Hello, sir.
They seem to be.
You were disconnected.
अब नहीं बिजली गच्छा इधर गई बिजली
अच्छा,
अब आज बिजली आई वापस when bunch of खत्म पत कर will get in after bunch of finish.
They seem to be intact, and there is a mutual respect within the Muslim community for those religious and cultural centers. You know, in any such form of agitation, it's irony that for creating a political narrative for whatever aspirations people have, we have seen it happening in Afghanistan, in Bahamian, when the richest heritage centers were destroyed. And what did they achieve out of that? Nothing. Nothing short of devastation. And what did the Kashmiri zealots also, supported by outsiders, what did they achieve? Nothing. They devastated their educational institutions. They devastated their own infrastructure, their bridges, their education institutions, their hospitals, and the multicultural ecosystem was almost disastrously decimated. But still, if we consider or if we compare both Bamihan and Kashmir as an example in this South Asia. It has been an exclusive attack to perpetuate exclusivism, not only as a political narrative, but also as socio religious and cultural entity. It has not worked. It will not work in the modern that world being a global village. It will not help. It will not help those Islamic countries also which have faced devastation and destruction in achieving their exclusivism. It has not worked. There is an introspection all over the world going on, particularly in the conflict areas where there was an attempt by people to have exclusivism. And in India also, the influence of such trends entered. When it entered, there was a disastrous culmination of that. And heritage representing the Indian ethos, whether it is the Muslim rulers which have contributed to that ethos, whether it is Hindu extremists who have contributed to that ethos, or whether there are Hindu civilizational leaders who have also contributed to that ethos. That came to be threatened. For the last almost 2.5 decades, it was threatened in a big way. And thank God that it is now getting stabilized, and people again in this country have realized that we need to preserve the heritage of Indian civilization, which is very rich and which is basically based on Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb.
Yes.
And it is a very, very far more richer than many of the ancient civilizations.
That's right.
And
Bansal,
I have a feeling that people are changing their discourse, and secularism, as you said, is gradually seeping in back to its revival formation. But it has to start from Kashmir. I will again emphasize that Kashmir is a barometer for India also to look into the cultural and multicultural digressions and attack by outside forces. Thank you
right,
very much.
Mr. Ashok Ban, if I will just interrupt there.
No,
We
I
have
have
sorry, we have got. I will come back to you again with this question. As I said, that I have got
Can I get it now?
this question. There are challenges, outside challenges and inside challenges, and we will look on those challenges as well. But we have got Mr. Salim Beg with us, and
back, yes.
Mr. Beg was trying to put some slides on. Let's
Lost
say,
his electricity.
yeah, let's try again.
He's back
If
now. Yeah.
we could do that. Mr. Beg, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Do
Yes,
you
I
see a
can.
slide?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am.
See
I'm,
all-
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm trying again to share the screen. I have
Yeah,
done
let's
it.
share.
I have done it.
I think there's a problem when you switch over to the presentation.
Yeah.
So
Now
do you
I
see
have
the
shared
screen now?
the screen. Now it's
So
your
do you see a
part
presentation
to
now?
do what you are going to do with it, sir.
So do you see a presentation on your screen?
No,
See
we
it now.
don't see.
No.
No.
No?
That is
No.
the problem. When you switch over to that, it gets disconnected.
I think you can tell us verbally.
I will do that if this doesn't happen. In that case, stream
It
is
doesn't
sharing your
happen. Yeah.
screen. Okay, now you have shared the screen. Have you shared it?
Yes, I have
We
shared
can't
it,
see.
sir.
We see you.
Is it there?
Yes,
No,
Can you
we
see the
can't see.
presentation?
We see you.
No
Not.
presentation.
but I can see your presentation, but it's not readable.
Okay, that happened earlier also.
Yes,
No,
Is
but
it
it's
okay
not
now?
in my on my screen.
it's
No,
I can
you're
see
not on
it,
my
but
screen.
it's not readable, sir.
Is it, earlier on also it was not readable, but you did something and it
No,
became readable.
not only we
Yeah,
couldn't see
because I have.
anything. We couldn't see nothing.
Okay, let's go through the process again.
Go verbal now. Yeah.
I think I'll do that. Let me try once only, if you permit me. Is it working now?
It is there. Your presentation is there, but not readable. I
What
think
did
you
you
have
do
not
last
shared
time
your
that it
screen.
became readable?
I think you have not shared your screen yet.
I have shared, that's why you can see this.
No, I can't
You-
see you. He can see you. I can't see you, Salim Saab.
And
Okay,
if you
I'll
can just
get back.
Can't see presentation.
let's do without slides if it's, but while talking,
Okay,
if you
let's
can.
try the last time, otherwise I'll do it verbally.
All right, sir.
We're gonna
Yeah.
get
So
verbally. We are wasting
I have
time.
lost the slide
We are
again.
losing time. Yeah.
Okay, can you see something?
No, sir, nothing.
Oh,
No,
forget about it.
nothing.
Okay, I'll go verbal.
Yeah.
I'll go verbal.
Okay.
So what we have been talking about, as the question was, history of multiculturalism, and as I said, we'll do it through a medium of architecture. What I have in front of me are the different periods of history of Kashmir, and we are talking of history, not prehistory or ancient, very ancient history. So we know for till 14th century, Kashmir as a civilization, as a country, was ruled by different empires. We had Mauryans, we had Kushans, we had Gunaras, then Huns came in 5th century, and then power reverted back to local native Karkota and Loharas. The advent of Islam in 14th century during the Shahmi Sultans, followed by Shaks, Mughal Empire, and Afghans, ushered Kashmir into a new phenomena, and that phenomena was the cross-cultural influences which Kashmir witnessed. Unfortunately, screens are not working, but what I'm showing here are these cross-cultural influences. What we have from the north is impact of Western areas, from Peshawar to Kabul. From the east, we had influence of China. We had also influence of Greeks, where Gandhara. We had also influence from mainland India during Roman and Gupta Empire. If you see today Jhelum riverfront, and if I could have shown you these visuals, I have a visual of 1901 and 2010. Not much of the skyline has changed in the city of Srinagar. So let's go back to the sacred architecture. The sacred architecture of Kashmir represents a historic medium of portrayal of Kashmir's identity, symbolizing a cultural fusion. And that cultural fusion has transcended communal barriers. It has also provided us with a historical narrative, which is in a way away from textual readings. And the architectural outpourings, which are witnessed in Kashmir, are linked with the sacred traditions of Buddhism, Hindu, Islam, which have been the main cultural influences. About 15 years back, we in our organization worked on a cultural resource mapping of Kashmir, essentially architectural mapping of Kashmir. The idea was to document buildings and precincts, but what we found pleasantly was that all these architectural buildings, all this architecture and architectural representations reflected a multicultural tradition and an understanding of the processes and features of this multicultural tradition came to light. And we found that there's a continuity in the built form in Kashmir. And this continuity has been through successive faiths. And in a way, it has been appropriating of this preceding faiths as well in a very harmonious transition. Our present architecture, which you can see in our shrines and other sacred places, is built on stone, brick, wood, and it defines not only the artistic outpourings of builders, but also the land of Kashmir, which in a way is a visual language. Therefore, what we have found is that this architecture is a physical representation of a syncretic culture that's based on assimilation and adaptation, while also forging continuity. Therefore, heritage and culture, which has evolved over a period of time, has assimilated many influences. And what are these influences? I wish I could have shown you these visuals. Anyway, I'll have to. One of the things which one would like to refer to here is a standard Kashmiri shrine. And what do you see in a shrine? Is a sacred space, and this sacred space has a brain. And if you look at the brain with some insight, it represents a shikara, which is a departure from what mosques of Central Asia or of subcontinent look like, dome structures. So, what is this statement which is being made? The statement is that while the methods of worship have changed, the physical form has been carried forward. And this physical form establishes a connect with the previous faiths. And that is also revealing this respect for the previous faith, which is very essential. If you slightly go back to the Buddhist influence of Kashmir, which is tremendous, let's not look at the political boundaries and divisions. We have been a single unit till very recently. And even before that, though, Buddhist lands were never part of Kashmir post-Buddhism, but influences continued. So in 10th century, we have a monastery built in Alchi, Ladakh. And if I could have shown you, I'm feeling very bad about it, how this Alchi monastery is constructed and what are the essential architectural features of this monastery. Now I'll take you back to Srinagar, take you to some shrines, and the most prominent in the oldest shrine is a shrine in Pampur, Muslim shrine. If you see the resemblance of architectural elements in Alchi and in Srinagar shrine, you will very immediately understand the continuity and the theme of continuity which I am speaking about. It's not only in the shrines which have directly been influences through religious architecture. If we talk about the vernacular architecture, I have a slide before me which is a temple on the riverfront. This temple merges so well with the vernacular, with the local presence in both architectural forms, in also the space and height, which reflects the essential respect for sacred space of other faiths. Obviously, temples represent Hindu faith. Okay. I will now take you to a specific shrine, which is Shrine of Shah Hamdan. It's a 15th century Sufi saint, came from Iran, and this shrine over a period of years evolved. It's not that he or during his time the shrine was constructed. This has been constructed, reconstructed, added over a period of another 400 years, if not more. This shrine has a central enclosed space, and that's what the Khanka is, which is a spiritual retreat. It bears an intimate resemblance with spatial layouts of, say, a Buddhist chaitya, because it has small functional rooms around, which are spiritual solitary retreats. These rooms are still available there for everybody to see. Its spire looks like a shikhar. And this shikhar is basically a idiom which has been repeated in all Sufi Rishi shrines in Kashmir. And these shrines dot the cultural landscape of all urban and rural areas of
आप
Kashmir.
आए नहीं?
We know historically Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, the great religions have all thrived here at one time or the other. And all these religions have given Kashmir great centers of learning in arts.
कोशिश करें.
Buddhism survived in Kashmir for 1,000 years with high and low influence. Not much of Buddhist architecture survives here, but one can draw from Buddhist architecture around, which traveled from Kashmir or which must have traveled from the Buddhist lands, as I mentioned about the shrine in Ampur, in all other shrines. And this medium of architecture has, over a period of years, given us an identity. And this identity has, okay, let me go back to the presentation now. So I'm here. Cancel this. So I'm back to the screen. What has happened over a period of time is that these lines have obliterated and these lines have overlapped. The result has been that specific understanding of the medium of architecture has not been as obvious or as, my God. Hello,
Yeah, carry on.
you can hear me?
Yes, yes,
Carry
yes,
on,
yes,
carry on.
Oh, I have lost the
Yes.
screen. Let me see if I can go back to the screen. I want to. Okay, anyway,
God.
so you can hear me. You
Yes,
can hear
yes,
me?
yes. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir. We can hear you
what
very much.
happened over a period of years is
Yeah.
that this architecture didn't freeze or it did not remain frozen as such. Got certain dimensions, but certain things have not changed, which are the basic fundamentals of this architecture, and that has been sacredness of space, which is reflected in our shrine. Let me tell you also about this multiculturalism. You know, the patron saints of Kashmir, Sheikh Nuruddin Wali, Lala Arifa. Lala Arifa was a Shiite saint, and there's no doubt about it. And Sheikh Nuruddin Wali was a practicing Muslim. We don't know, they were all 14th century saints, and they must have survived in cultural and vernacular memory or imagination of Kashmir, but there's no mention, period mention about that. The first time we get to hear about Lala Arifa and Sheikh Nuruddin Wali together in written form is through a book called Azkirat al-Arifin. This is a book which was written in 16th century, about 100 years after, 200 years after that period. And this is when we got to know that the Rishi cult, which is the main leading religious cult followed by Kashmir or religious faith followed by Kashmir. And this cult, patron saint for this cult is Sheikh Nuruddin Wali, who links himself directly to Lal Ded. And he links himself to Lal Ded through his poetry. And this poetry, all along, we have seen, meant that Sheikh Nuruddin Wali followed Lal Ded both in thought and practice. He offered through his poetry a definition or description of Lal Ded where he said, Tas Padman Porch Lale Yem Amrit Cho Gale Gale, which means that Lalla of Padmanpur where she lived, she drank Amrit, sip by sip. And then he concludes this by saying she was indeed an avatar. And she is accepted as an avatar by the Rishi faith. And mind you, she was a Shavite. Well, I'm sure others will also expand on the thought of Rishi culture, Rishi sect, Rishi cult, whatever you may call them. But we have seen all these Rishi namas, which were written by Kashmiri Muslim scholars, had one theme and thread going through, and that thread was respect for other faiths, acceptance of other faiths, not only acceptance of other faiths, also allowing space for all the faiths to coexist. So that is how it has evolved over a period of years, and that is what I find multiculturalism in Kashmir over a period of years through history. Thank you. I will leave it at that, and I feel bad I was not able to take you through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beg. I'm really sorry that we were not able to put your presentation on the screen due to some technical problems, but there is another time always. Let me come to Mr. M.K. Rana. Mr. Rana, you heard both Mr. Ashok Ban as well as Mr. Salim Beg, and accepting the different faiths and different cultures, as Mr. Salim Beg was telling. You being a person from the theater and film, how you think that theater and film has developed and has been able to protect and promote multiculturalism in Kashmir? Could you show some light on it through your own practical experiences?
Yes, I'll try. I'll try. Definitely, I'll try.
Thank you.
First of all, you see, I'm a practicing cultural person, and I am the person who has been there from 1999 till date. I work in villages there. I work in an indigenous theatre form, which I think is the most modern form, which we call Bandapatra, and mostly you ignore it. It's a village form and other thing. For me, it's one of the most avant-garde forms of art. It has all the elements that are needed for any kind of modern play that can be done. To the extent, a couple of years back, I did Shakespeare's King Lear with them, and it became a big thing all over country. We have toured every part of the Indian continent, and there was possibility of going abroad, but it didn't work out. Having said that, what interests me is that this theatre form, particularly cinema, we don't have. Kashmir makes films, but what's called cinema, it's not there. There is a lot of sentimentality in it. But I think the most old form, ancient form is Bandapatra, and there you see the multiculturalism in it. You see the Abhinav Gupta's Natya Shastras, Bharata's Natya Shastras elements in it. You see also Central Asian influence it. You see Persian influence it. Because I'll give you a story I have to share with you. I went to Taimur Museum in Tashkent, and I was going around, and there was one photograph, big photograph, which was about Sufyana Kalam singing of the Azerbaijanis, and it was absolutely like Kashmiris, same Saz Kashmir, Santur, Setar, and other things, and I clicked a picture on it for myself. It looked like a Kashmiri thing to me. And I went to Kashmir and I played a joke with one of the master musicians there called Yaqub. I said, Yaqub, can you tell me which family is this? He looked at the picture and he said, I think it's Ahad Sabin. I said, come on, this is from Taimur Museum. And he couldn't believe it. Then I zoomed in one spiritual. Salim Saab knows it. On one person who's playing, and there was a tika on his hair. It is a Kashmiri tika. I said, this mystery I can't understand. And I'm still going to dig out. I'm doing some major work on it to see what came and what went back. See, culturalism, when you say, it is interdependence. We can put it camouflage, bhaichara, brotherhood, brothers. That is all right, but it is interdependence. We depend on each other. That is, for me, culturalism. Look at the map of Kashmir, for example. This map is, you have many countries around it. They had a dialogue. Traders used to go, people used to go, scholars used to come. Kashmir was one of the big centers intellectually during the Sanskrit time, during the Persian time, during even now it is there. So I would say the dialogue makes it possible. When people invade or they travel with their literature or their what technology, craft, other things, and that is when the seeds of multiculturalism start sprouting and being. I take something from you, you take something from me. For example, when I go to Shah or I go to Jamia Masjid, I see inside it has an Iwan, it is inside where the namaz is offered, it's like central Asian Azerbaijani Masjid. Same pillars, similar pillars. I got that documented. When you see it from outside, I see the shed is outside like a Nepali temple. Same structure, same. They call them Buddhist, you call them whatever. But the point is, sacred and the secular simultaneously exists. The urge of Kashmiri culture has been always this. If you look at the poetry, even the modern poetry, Rasul Mir, you look at, Shad Sahib will talk about it, they even now use the images and metaphors of Buddhist, Islamic, and the Shavite Muslim. They lend and create that great mosaic of beauty of poetry. So I now I want to reflect a point. At this point, I'll say that globalization was put in here by Bhan Sahab. I think globalization has created a lot of problems when you see it, because it got mixed with the neo economic policy. It's a little political what I'm talking. And today the disasters that we see in the Arab countries, other countries, is the domination of the. It did not work with the big powers that way. On the contrary, I see that Western cultural domination is coming more and more on us. We are therefore what we have gets into conflict. The schisms and the political powers will play their power. It's not that only the Pakistan was involved in it. You open the doors, you will see something else was behind that, something else was behind that. It's about minerals, it's about domination of the politics, of many dominations. What has suffered in Kashmir is outside, because I work inside. I'm in the gut of it. I work with them. I always say, Kashmir poet, if you anybody knows how to mop this up, it is still the same. Everything's preserved the same. Certain distortions have come into it. Their temples have been broken down. People have died in thousands. But I still see the soul of Kashmiri multiculturalism. It's a practice, because the seeds are not sown today. They're already sown it. But its manifestation you will see in Kashmiri poetry, contemporary poetry. You take Rahi, you take Shad Ramzan, you take Amin Kamil, you take painters. For example, Buddhist Beksa was saying about this Buddhist thing. Harvan is still there, and there is those tiles are there, and then the figurative art is there, which has been taken. You will be surprised by the contemporary painters like Kachuru and others. They got inspired by that iconography which was there on those images and created their contemporary art. The whole story about it. So I think multiculturalism is not needed. It is part of the humankind's evolution. Diversity is part of the evolution of planet. You cannot see any jungle, you cannot see any nature, beautiful nature. There's only one kind of species there. The man moves, seeds move, they fly up and down. So Kashmir in that way has been most incredible, because it was like a crucible of ideas. Ideas on linguistics, ideas on poetry, ideas on sound. Nobody talks about it. Anand Vardhan, one of the great scholars, he wrote a book called Dhwani Alok, which talks of the science of sound, which is being studied all over the world. The dialogue of these scriptures you'll see is happening in Kerala. There's paper after paper, you will see them doing this. How did they reach there? There has been some agents who must have been taking these books there. So I think if man has to survive politically and economically and culturally, diversity has to come. It is coming. It will come. I mean, if you go to from Ladakh, you see laborers from Bihar and Jharkhand. They are working for you. Whether I like it or not, they have been there for a while. So it again opens a little corridor more about my pluralism. It goes finally to the society has to be plural. There is nothing as it is a false notion. There's something called very pure. There's nothing pure. Everything has been brought from somewhere or the other. It's like a cooking pot. And Kashmir has been the crucible of ideas. And that is the culturalism which I see. Because, I'll tell you, when I talk to Bahans, for example, when I sit them under a tree, believe me, they talk like
Right.
any philosopher to me. I mean, I'm amazed at the Ghulam Rasul talked to me. I said, Ghulam Rasul is a fantastic Sarnai player. I said, Ghulam Rasul, tell me, what does the Sarnai mean to you? You know what he said to me? He says, Abnai, Vavnai, Khakanai, Naranai, Nai, Nai, Nai. I was stunned. And I said, where did you get it? Tell me. He says, Maulana Rumi says in the beginning of his Masnavi. Now he's an illiterate man, he can't read and write. But when you put a discourse with him, you will see the life's experience gives us him something. That hawa jo hai na, that air that is multiculturally in Kashmir needs again to be preserved, yes, because distortions of history have come. I think global powers are doing their own game, and we have a small little state, and we have lost that state. I want my state back, honesty. I don't like to be in the union territory. That is lost, needs to be back, and multiculturalism is still preserved there, whether I like it or not. Politically, you may not see it. Externally, you might see it. Inside, in the gut, it is there. I'll stop at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rana. Ban Sahab, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
I think you have yes. Mr. Ashok Ban, you were earlier talking about some challenges facing our multiculturalism in Kashmir. You have rightly pointed out some external challenges, but what do you think that what are the inside challenges that on the country basis we are facing, and it has an impact on Kashmir as we are seeing it? Mr. Rana has rightly said it, that diversity is the part of evolution, and society needs to be plural. So, what do you think that what are the inside challenges for protecting our multiculturalism in Kashmir?
Inside was basically from across the border, there was a tendency that a different type of Islam should enter Kashmir and change the socio-cultural pattern of life in Kashmir. And the first and foremost was that to make it singular, you have to exit any other cultural or religious entities, which was very neatly and subtly executed. And Kashmiris did resist to it. I want to, your medium, say that it was the tallest Mirwais of Kashmir who in 90 itself said that we cannot exit a different religious entity from Kashmir. It would be harmful for our own political and cultural ecosystem in the valley. And because he was a Mirwais, he was a practice leader in Kashmir, but no other political entity ever talked about this like this. Number two, that it was worth examining that most victim of that cultural aggression and political aggression were also the majority community members. They also had to fight for their life, and they came down to the plains and went back and settled gradually there. They went back with one assurance in their mind and heart that at least the outside influence has not devastated to this extent that we are not accepted. But in the case of another community like which is in exile, this question ponders the whether this community, if it thinks of going back as a community, is acceptable in that social milieu or not? It's a big question which nobody has answered politically, culturally, or religiously, except that young Mirwais has been making noises at the podium of his famous mosque that we are welcome, they are part of us, this, that. But that saying has to be actualized. This is the time when it has to actualize. That's how the multiculturalism will can revive and thrive in Kashmir. Otherwise, it is a unilateral culture. It's a one-side affair only. This is in Kashmir. And in India, what has happened over the years, as I said, that what the reaction of revival of Islam and militant Islam from Koikab to Gilgit in that arc outside Indian, which asserted itself in a big way, started from Iranian change, then Afghanistan, then other states also, and coupled with Islamic terrorism also with it. It definitely sent shivers to Indian society that we have a very big enemy at our door. So therefore, we may need to, restructure our political and other narratives. And in the process, what happened is that the right wing Hindu parties gained the ascendancy. And their gaining ascendancy certainly has further devastated the multicultural ethos of our state, as Rana Saab has put it. I also am a votary of my state. I have a very rich heritage of my state. Jammu and Kashmir is one of the most respectable states in whole of the subcontinent and in whole of South Asia. And dealing with Kashmir like this and converting it into a smaller two union territories has not gone well with even people like us. All responsible citizens of that state have not countenanced this, as have not stomached this. So therefore, that is the political aspect of it. But it cannot prevent you, me, Salim Saab, and Rana Saab, or thousands like us, to again revive, work for the revival of our own multiculturalism, which is far richer than any of the civilizations in South Asia. And Kashmiris have shown the resilience that they have not allowed, despite being again a Muslim majority, they have not allowed the other Islamic thought to creep in big way and change their ecosystem, cultural ecosystem or socio-cultural ecosystem in Kashmir. Except one thing is wanting, that the day the other religious minorities, which is in exile, goes back, settles back, and also contributes in revival of the multiculturalism in Kashmir, as I said, to build it as a template of the new modern era. You know, fall of Trump has also given us a political signal. It has given us a signal that the rhetoric of nationalism so called, based on only exclusiveness, does not work with the people in general. Even if he has done a lot of good work on economics of, but it is not working even in India. You have seen that in a multicultural, multilingual multi-religious India, the Hindu nationalist forces are not all prevailing. They may be dominant, but it's not all prevailing. And
Mhm.
there are dents getting created, and this trend will emerge in near future. Politically, I may be talking something which may not happen in our lifetime, but as somebody, as a citizen, conscientious citizen of this country who has lived through the multiculturalism, multi uh, political ethos of this country and my state, will not stomach all this what is happening in today's context. And if secularism is revived, if pluralism is revived in Kashmir, mind you, that would be leading the real pluralism to India also, because
Mhm.
it was Nehru who had the Kashmiri ethos and Kashmiri heritage with him. Only lead this country to multiculturalism, multilingual, and secularism in the real sense. So all others had to fall in line with him because he was not a casteist, he was a pure Kashmiri Brahman breed. So therefore, Kashmiris, if they revive their pluralism, it will again give a lead to this country and maybe even to Pakistan to adopt multiculturalism as their own ethos, which is eroding and which has devastated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bansab. I may have to come to you again. Let me go to Beg Saab again. Beg Saab, you heard Mr. Ashok Ban, and you know that Kashmir has been famous for its diversity, plurality, and harmony. But as Mr. Ashok Ban said, that the two major communities have distant. Do you think that there are any prospects for revival of that centuries old Milsar of Kashmir? What is your opinion about that?
Well, let me tell you, I would entirely agree with the assessment of Bansar on multiculturalism and diversity of Kashmiri society. I want to make one or two points. One, we have to accept it that that has been challenged and that has depleted a lot. But most of these things have been happening off campus. As Bansab said, for certain political reasons, we got influences which brought in a fundamentalist strain, but that was more political than religious from across the border. And that fundamentalist strain did negatively impact the whole situation. But that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is within our own country, things have not been very helpful. If you go back to 90s, early 90s, you know, the situation in rest of the country. Rest of the country, starting from Babri Masjid movement, demolition followed a huge movement. A process of othering had started. While Kashmiri Muslims were trying, Kashmiri Muslim thought was trying to accommodate within its larger context the larger Indian ethos and process. They suddenly found things happening where they were othered. They couldn't relate themselves with the kind of events which unfortunately happened simultaneously. The militancy started in 90 and this process of militarization, Hindu nationalist assertion happened almost the same time. And one supported the other. So there's a bigger challenge in Kashmir now. The bigger challenge is that I don't know about numbers. People have left and people have moved on with their lives. But the level of acceptance, what I find in Kashmir, is at a degree where I would, on a conceptual or a creative space, find that there's a lot of yearning for returning of Kashmiri Pandits to Kashmir, but the aspect is that if they return, what do they do there? They are moved out with their lives settled around, and also that the situation in which they left has to return to a stage where they find themselves, if not as residents, at least as citizens, ethnic Kashmiris, that they are being respected, they are being welcomed, because beyond respect, we will have also to give a feeling of welcome. But then it will have to happen both ways. Let me be very frank about it. There's a lot of poison and a lot of extremism which has crept in that society, at least some representatives of that society also, and they have again not helped the matters in Kashmir to settle down. I won't apportion percentages, and I am not here to blame any community. But let me tell you that extremism on one side has generated and helped the extremism on the other side. That's my feeling.
Thank you very much, Beg Saab. In order to bridge the gaps and in order to bring the two distant communities together, Beg Saab's opinion is that it needs to be seen from the both sides, not from the one side. Mr. M.K. Rana, I know, as I have already said, this thing that a man from film and from theater. You might bear me out that recently there were some films made on Kashmir, but unfortunately, those films do not give what we call a right and the true reflection of the of Kashmir. So, what do you think, as a film and as a theater director, the damage which has been exaggerated? What is, in your opinion, that you have been doing or you plan to do to wash out that impression?
You see, I don't think I may make 10 films that will change the tide. It may help a little bit. Some people have this big notion that the Bombay film people come and make film. Unfortunately, I don't like any of those films. And it pains me to say, because some of them are my friends, I know them very well. Some of them have lived in Kashmir also. But the point is, do they really understand Kashmir? Do they really understand what is happening? There is this problem of market and the reality. Unfortunately, the market is more important and the publicity becomes more important. Beksa will bear me out. I have not publicized my 15, 20, 16 years work in Kashmir anywhere. Because I believe that if I have to change and contribute, I have to be quietly doing that, not trying to become a big hero. I'm in Kashmir, I'm doing this great work. This work of repairing is really like doing mending ways, like rafu nahi karte hain. It's like rafu and making new seeds. I've been able to do that. I've been able to create a lot of theater people. They're working in small towns. They have come to the national festivals. Some of them to international festivals also. But that is what is needed. Like Kashmiri has to talk about Kashmir. Others coming from outside and making films and talking about Kashmir and I give them facilities there will not help us. The way I will address the situation there, the man from Bombay who has spent years there and has some notion that gets to come Kashmir will not happen. What is needed in Kashmir is a cultural renaissance. Damage has happened too big. But people are there. There are remarkable talents among the younger people there I work with. They're remarkable kids. You can't believe what kind of capacity there. But where are the opportunities? It becomes difficult to work in Kashmir because of the resources for them and also the place where we can work. You will not believe, in the beginning I used to be hiding behind the mountain and work there with these youngsters, and they were with me all 1 month, day in, day out, 24 hours we're working. So they have created their triple. You can today, Band Patra is nationally known very well. The people are bringing that, working more with them. Then youngsters are writing new plays. Some young writers have written. There's one film, I forget the name, which I loved, which was a Kashmiri playwright, Muhammad Amin Bhatt, who wrote a play about this young child. He's talking to Allah on phone. Where's my father? It's very moving film, but it could only be done by Kashmiri writer who knew what was happening. So I think all of us have to put our heads together. How can we do? Because there is this other, which, that other is very, which everybody, Bhan Saab also and Salim Saab also pointed out, they are very powerful today. Today, India is not what it was, I would say, 10 years back. It's not, it's tough. It's now very tough even to talk to your own relatives, talk to your own friends. Therefore, the resources and the place and the organized resources for cultural are needed and should be done. Individually, we all work. All of us are working there. Many people, I'll tell you, they are working there in various areas, education, in teaching, in drama, in cinema. But a consolidated work together to put a case, to put. First, the problem is, can we show that work to our own people? Cinema halls are not there. It's all to be done on television, and television is not under our control. There are a lot of these, and it's not in your hands. You have a talent, but you don't have hands. It's like a factory which is not in your hands. It's Malik ki cheez hai. So that is a very big challenge, and resources becomes a much, much bigger challenge. Everything is otherwise ready there. You can give them the facilities tomorrow. They will. But what is happening, unfortunately, when the facilities come to Kashmir, it's not given to the locals. It goes to outsiders, and that creates another problem.
Thank you.
Of content making as well as of the Kashmiris are not doing.
Thank you.
But it is a big tool.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rana. Mr. Beg, I had some questions for Professor Shad Ramzan, but unfortunately, due to the bad internet connections, we are not able to get in touch of Mr. Shad Ramzan. But let me ask you one of the questions. As you know, that language is a very important vehicle for promoting culture.
Yes.
Yes,
Kashmiri, you have been working with the heritage and with the history of Kashmir. How Kashmiri poets, old and new at the time, are helping to contribute to grow and strengthen the multiculturalism in Kashmir. I remember one of the verses of famous poet Mahjur, Nyai Thoyu, Mai Thoyu, Panwin, Puz Muhabbat Burgarayu, Panwin. That Muhabbat, that love, that harmony seems to be a little bit weakened, but there are potential always to revive that. So, how would you think that our poets and writers are in a position to bridge the gap?
Well, if I may make this bold statement, if there's any ray of hope or light, or if there's anything to celebrate about this challenging 30 years or 35 years, whatever you may see, it is the literature, especially the poetry, which has emerged from Kashmir. Not today, through centuries. In fact, the first statement, again, let me go back to Sheikhul Alam, who said, and that is the signature which has been flowing through poets, through Rishi poets. Many Rishi Namas are all poetry, and there are about 11 Rishi Namas, if I can count them, who celebrate this diversity, who believe that God is one, human society is one. You may worship in a different way, you may worship in different manner. Then we have poets in Kashmir who have celebrated this diversity. Rahman Rahi, Raina Saab mentioned. Dinanath Nadim is before you. I mean, Kamil is there. Who are the towering personalities in Kashmiri literary world? Raina Saab also referred to the present contemporary young poets and poetesses, Naseem Shafai, others. they have really been trying their best to reinstate the faith in essentials of Kashmiri society. And they have really been doing something which perhaps should remain in the history as one of the best statements we could make. So, literature that has survived over centuries, literature we are generating now, is testimony to the belief, essential belief into multiculturalism, as you have titled it, to the diversity of Kashmiri society. So that is one hope which will sustain us for a long time to come. And that is something which we will in future also mention with pride and respect.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beg. We are coming towards the end of the program. We have got a few minutes now. Let me take Mr. Ashok Ban on the issue. He has raised some very important points that what has happened to our diverse community, to our harmony, and to our love. Now, the question arises, what you think, Mr. Ban, that the right thinking people from the different communities should do and should initiate the process of revival of that harmony which we have lost? Do you have any practical suggestion for that, Mr. Ban?
You know, practical suggestions could be couple of them, but since all this is linked very intricately with the politics of the day, so therefore it's very difficult to suggest that what could be the best. But let me tell you, I am an incorrigible optimist. I have always been that. And I tell you, I have faith in my own people, that is Kashmiris, across the board. I have been critical of Pakistan of destroying the ethos and Kashmir, but never critical of my own brethren for the reason that some of them got swayed. But let me tell you, I see a ray of hope in the present youth of Kashmir. That youth which got educated outside Jammu and Kashmir for these years, and they are numbering almost 4 to 5 lakhs. And when they go back, they act as the agents of the change. They act as the ambassadors of the change there because they see, they interact with a new aspiring hub of not only India, but other states wherever they go, other countries wherever they go. When they come back with a positive mind and they are not religiously motivated. They are really motivated. They are motivated by modern education. So, modern education is one way for the revival of our ethos. Another example I give you, we have DP Dar Memorial School functioning in Jammu and Kashmir, and it is being run by his son Vijay Dar and a trust. I have been following him and asking him many questions. And so is Professor Saifuddin Soz running a school in Badgam of the same characteristic. These two modern institutions have produced brilliant young boys and girls, and in multi vocations, not only in education. And some of them have on their own merit, gone and sought admissions in the highest seats of learning of universities outside. So the education in-house in the Kashmir has also its pattern and its curriculum has to change to the modernity from that traditional one. This is another way I am perceiving. Third, what our great friend, philosopher, and actor M. Rana is doing for last 20 years. He feels that nobody watches him, everybody watches. We have an eagle's eye. Beg Saab, myself, many others. We watch him so thoroughly, and maybe at some time we also push his efforts invisibly somewhere, so that because we are committed to see the revival of that pluralism through culture, through theater, through not cinema, because cinema has still some reservations there. You raise certain cinema issues, those are only marketing issues. They are marketing on the miseries of a community that we don't believe in. Third factor is, which is education, culture, theater, and then concentration on the young generation. And I have always raised a question at the political level, that how is it that the Indian policymakers are so naive that they don't allow any room for those mainstream political parties to exert influence on the young generation not to take to the gun culture. So if you shrink the space, even for those who are committed for mainstreaming Kashmir, it raises a very suspicious question. I have been agitating it in my writings, in my verbal meetings, everywhere, and there is some amount of hope which I receive. But the fact remains that even Beg Saab, like he is a person, when he was director of the tourism, I was in Srinagar, I saw tourist reception center, the hub of our heritage, repository of our heritage, got gutted. And he, me, everybody, we were mute spectators to that. But it was his efforts that he tried to construct that in the same architectural form, so that he reminds people of Kashmir that here is your heritage. Revival of those heritages. I say even the temples of those who are in exile. Until you revive the other side also and showcase it to the younger generation that we have to live in the mosaic of a multicultural society. We can't live exclusively in one form of society. So these are few suggestions, but we are not in government. We could collect ideas and give it to the government, and
Right.
it falls to deaf ears. And
Thank you, Bansab.
mind you, Rana Saab, that you are one of the greatest icons of this culturalism, revival of multiculturalism. And
Thank you.
let me remind you,
I,
let me remind you, everybody detests Mufti Muhammad Said. But mind you, he was the only person who was really encouraging all such activities. And I think Rana Sahib will bear me out. No other person, those who pretend that we are secularists in Kashmir, they are politically very shallow and they are culturally very shallow. Their politics is suspect, their heritage is suspect. So
sorry.
therefore, there we can go on. We have to enlarge the scope of this discussion. If we
Definitely,
look
Bansab.
at the good health of our Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bansab. Before we go, we have Bansab has raised an important question that in order to protect and preserve the heritage. Fortunately, we have Mr. Salim Beg on our program today.
Mr. Rana has raised his finger. He wants to respond to some.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Rana. Before I will ask this
I just wanted to, I
could you
want to
please
give you some information.
Yes,
Javed Saab, I just want to give simple information to you that cultural awareness, whatever that is now prevalent in it, has been Salim Saab and I have been working almost hand in hand together. In fact, I called
Tirelessly.
Salim one day. I said, do you know? I said, we almost got killed at one point. I said, and he said, "हम तो नहीं करेंगे तो कौन करेगा?" I
Correct.
think there are very few people who are doing it. Whether it is
Right.
language, whether it is theater, whether it is culture, even awareness, even body, something can be done outside, which can provide certain resources. Then
Yes.
things can accelerate. Otherwise, looking at the government has its own priorities. They don't give you damn. I mean, I worked so many years there. I've yet to see a government telling me, what do you need? Do you need something from us? We have not been asking them money. We have not been asking them anything. But because culture is the last priority across India, not only in Kashmir, but culture is the backbone, a spinal cord of any society. It is a cushion on which, whenever you are under stress, you put your head on, and it gives you a little comfort, which
Right.
our
Yeah.
political class hardly understands. They don't understand. And culture is like a carpet weaving. It's really weaving. Every thread has to be brought together till the design grows before us. And
Right.
for that, I don't know. I don't have many solutions. But we have intervened in education. Salim Saab चुप क्यों है मुझे पता नहीं. We intervened in the education system. We got disappointed many times. We have trained a lot of teachers. We have worked with orphan children, and some of those orphan children became brilliant. I meet them today sometime. They recognize me. I don't recognize them. Novelists, engineers, because we caught them at a certain point for 10 days, 12 days with us, just to bring that hope into them, to bring them some. And we did something remarkable workshop. It is now that we brought Pandit children from the camps and the Muslim
Camps.
children from the to Jammu for 12 days with us, and the results were remarkable. And we got videos with us as a cushion to help us even there. So it is. These are individual efforts. These are efforts with small little things. These are little bricks Salim and I have been doing for the years, for now donkey's years. But we do that. वो तो ये आपका faith है, आपका अकीदा, आप करते रहेंगे. But I think it should have multiplied by now.
Yes.
Not to me. The people who have trained, we are giving them the fishing rod. They are in the villages. They are in the kasbahs. Catch them. They will do that work.
That's great, sir. That's great, sir, that you have been doing a lot of work, including Mr. Beg Saab. So I was going to ask Beg Saab a question about which Mr. Ashok Ban just pointed out. The question is that Beg Saab, you have been doing a tremendous job along with Mr. Rana Saab to protect the heritage of Kashmir. Now, the religious places of Hindu community who left in 90s, what kind of efforts are being made to look after those places?
But if this is a specific question about the religious places of Kashmiri Pandits, by and large, the major Pandit places of worship, let me tell you frankly and honestly, are safe and secure. There are no issues. Leave aside propaganda. I have seen some vandalization is taking place in some villages where there were local community worship places, worshipping areas, and people had left. There was no security, and some vandalization is taking place here. But the whole problem is that I'm sorry to say this. This is a statement which should be taken in right separate. When we were doing documentation of Srinagar city, we documented all temples. Our problem was that in our list of
Yeah.
documentation, we have also to mention the history of each temple. Our publication, which was a 2-volume publication, got delayed by 6 months because whoever Pandit representative I contacted from Dharma Trust to Hindu Mahasabha, asking them to tell us the historic background, because obviously there's a respect for these
They
temples in the
did not
local
do a thing.
community, but nobody came forward. I mean,
Yeah.
credit go to that great old Kashmiri Pandit doctor, Dr. Dhar, who worked hard and finally got us some information. Kashmiri Pandits have to realize that they can exist only in the cultural and spiritual space which they were occupying in Kashmir. They can't
Yeah.
use the space against Kashmiri Muslims and still expect that they will be part of this milieu. That's not possible. I don't think, frankly, they have enough ownership. I'm not saying they don't own it. They own it because it belongs to them. They have taken enough ownership of their cultural property, which includes shrines. If that happens, I can assure them there's no animosity. I wish I had been able to show you the presentation where I can show you how places of worship of both communities coexist. Springs of a Pandit temple are shared by a mosque. The Muslim shrine open spaces are used by Kashmiri Pandits. This is there. But let me tell you, it has to be both ways. Kashmiri Pandits will have to take ownership and they have to prove to themselves that this is something which they own, not for the sake of propaganda, for the sake of their cultural survival. They should come forward and work with the local community wherever there are threats. I'm not discounting that these places have not remained threatened. They have remained threatened. They have remained vulnerable. There's no doubt about it. And in certain places, I wouldn't say that, as I mentioned, in the rural areas, there have been certain instances where these temples were tampered with. So both communities will have to take the responsibility. And for the places of worship, I would
Right.
again
It,
come back to the point which I made here.
right, bakes up. So this is the responsibility of both the communities to come
Exactly.
together, and find the ways
Don't
of.
leave it to Kashmiri Muslim that he will protect it. You have to come forward and
Yes,
assert your ownership for these places.
yes. Bakes up. Before we go, that could you please tell us that we have a very huge department and a very big department called what we call that Cultural Academy of Kashmir. Are you satisfied with them that they are doing their job in
Well, well,
protecting
let
and
me tell
promoting
you,
our
they are,
multiculturalism?
yeah, they're as good as bad or as bad as governments can be, but we have some very good secretaries who have been working there and they've generated a lot of literature. But let me tell you, they are mostly into government governmental programs. And as Mr. Rana also mentioned, that we do find that we should do more from the governmental side in terms of building the cultural infrastructure, which unfortunately is not happening. And Cultural Academy has a responsibility to support building cultural infrastructure in Kashmir. The
Mhm.
responsibility should be fulfilled.
Right.
Mr.
Lastly,
Rana also Mr. Rana also mentioned them outside support for this.
all
I
right.
would have thought that local, governmental, outside, any support would be welcome for this.
Lastly, I would like to ask Mr. M. K. Rana, how do you think that interfaith conferences and interfaith activities could play a role in reviving our Nilsar love environment?
I tell you, Javed sir, lot of youngsters, our juniors, there is a one called Salam Mahara. It's an NGO. And they did 1.5 year a beautiful function at Tagore Hall. They got some of us, we came there, but there were youngsters talking what their grandfathers were telling them about their place. It was such a moving 3 hour program. Young people are there. Problem is to locate them. This group is doing exactly what you're saying. Getting together people, how we were, what मिलसार कैसे होता था हमारा, day to day lives कैसे चलती थी, elders, seniors like senior poets come and tell them what we were before this whole thing happened. There are attempts at every level individually happening. And unfortunately, when it comes to state at support, they see it in a different kind of a program. They don't see it as a culture. Culture is something, these are the synergies which are not for propaganda. Culture is not propaganda. Culture is not what you call demagogy. Culture is not political lecture. Culture is the, blood into veins and the arteries going up and down, keeping the heart, pumping the blood in the heart. that it happens quite. You don't need they mostly do a big program, big festival. That is for propaganda. I would say the people who have been in Kashmir, who have been doing under you have no, there's no time to tell you the stories how these artists have suffered in the villages, what they have gone through. I mean, there is no journalist has written their stories. They're so heart-rending. When I met them after 10 years, as if somebody had died. 20 of them were elder to my age, were crying and crying. They don't have
Right.
a economic support. They don't have, I mean, a recognition of their great talents, despite the fact they got national awards. Still, there is nothing happening to them. Their lives don't change. It is quite a complex, I accept it, but it has to be done. It cannot be avoided if you want culture to help you in some kind of a healing process. It has to be
So,
addressed,
so kind of
and it
you,
has to be
Mr. M.
addressed horizontally, not vertically. Not
Right.
vertically.
Thank
It
you.
cannot happen vertically.
Thank, thank you very much. We are coming towards the end of our this program. There were lots of things which I came to know for the first time. As I said earlier, that culture is a very vast subject, and whether we have been able to do any justice in one program or not, but definitely, World Telecast will be bringing some programs which we will look into the different dimensions of our culture. I thank all of you, and unfortunately, we were not able to get Mr. Professor Sadiq Wahid because of his illness, and I lost two of my very eminent guests, Mr. Ajit Singh Mastana and Mr. Professor Shad Ramzan.
Yes,
Unfortunately,
yes,
we were
yes.
not being able to get them due to the bad internet connections in Jammu as well as in Kashmir. I
That
hope
says
that
quite a bit.
that says exactly that says quite a bit. So in future, I will be trying to get in touch with them and you as well for the different aspects of the program. I thank you all. I thank you, Mr. M. K. Rana. I thank you, Mr. Salim Bey, and
Thank
I
you.
thank you, Mr. Ashok Ban, for
Thank you.
giving you time for this valuable discussion. So,
Thanks
and
a lot.
we will be definitely looking forward to have you some other time. Thank you very
Nice
much.
seeing my friends. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Javed Saab. That was
Thank
nice.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thanks
very
a
much.
lot.